Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of a webinar from the Asia Pacific Financial Wellness Initiative. I'm so proud to say that today is the very first day of Financial Inclusion Week from Monday, the 1st of November through till the Thursday, the 4th. And we have a fantastic panel waiting to discuss women and financial inclusion. But before I go any further, let me acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from sunny Melbourne, from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So today's topic, which is women and financial wellness, is a fantastic one that my wonderful partner, Mariko Braswell, will now take over and introduce our panelists to you.
Thank you so much, Vinita. We are so pleased to be collaborating with RFI Group and on this event, and we all thank Axion and the Center for Financial Inclusion for including us on their Financial Inclusion Week platform this week. We're also so pleased to bring you this discussion on a topic that's so close to our hearts: financial wellness for women and the necessity for a gendered lens approach. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Anna Shaw from RFI Group, who will introduce our esteemed guests and be moderating our discussion today.
Thanks so much, Mariko. And what an exciting topic to be doing a panel session on today. I think it's both interesting, but also really important when we're thinking about financial wellness, especially in the last 2 years with the pandemic, and how financial wellness is becoming more and more at the forefront of consumers' minds, even those who in the past maybe weren't thinking about financial wellness or, their own finances as much, compared to previously. And the focus on women as well is a really important one. And I'm really excited to have two fantastic panelists to discuss this topic with me today. And I'll just introduce them briefly and then hand over to each of them to let us know a little bit more about themselves and also why financial wellness is so important to them. So first of all, we have Adam Mooney, who is the CEO of Grameen Australia, and Dr. Pushpa Wood, who is the Director at the Financial Education and Research Centre for Massey University in New Zealand. Now, Adam, I might start with you to give us a little bit more information about Grameen Australia and also why financial wellness is an important topic to you and this focus on women as well.
Thank you, Anna, and hello, Pushpa, and it's wonderful to be able to join everybody here for Financial Inclusion Week. And but thank you for that introduction. Grameen, as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of Grameen Australia, and we're starting operations in Australia actually next month in Broadmeadows in a northern suburb of Melbourne. We're opening our very first branch, and we received some investment from the Australian government, and with state government funding coming and other funding, where we plan to reach over 35,000 women on low incomes to be able to either start their own micro enterprise or to grow an existing micro enterprise as well. And I think for those that are on this webinar may be familiar with Grameen. Grameen is a global microfinance organisation. We're part of the Grameen family of organisations where we've been in existence in Australia for around 20 years, mainly with fundraising activities and running programs or investing in programs in Cambodia, Laos, Philippines and elsewhere. A couple of years ago, we realised there's a great opportunity here to bring the Grameen concepts to Australia and to start micro enterprise development programs here. And as you mentioned, the pandemic has provided a catalyst, I think, for us to start our operations that we saw very much a situation where with economic insecurity disproportionately negatively impacting women, with the gig economy, and so on, we actually saw us all being forced all around the world to embrace home-based working. And of course, Grameen specialises in that, bringing together small groups of women and in some cases men, but predominantly women in groups of 5 to share their ideas, to have the solidarity of the group, and to be able to have hope and belonging and find connectedness within that group, but to run individual enterprises as part of that. So that's a really, that investment in the Grameen approaches is something that we're looking for great success, and we're quite confident of having that sort of impact and realising economic mobility. Financial wellness, what does it mean to us? It means financial wellness means that we are able, all of us, all 7.6 billion of us on the planet, are able to live full lives. We're able to set goals for ourselves and in an uninhibited way realise those goals. And really, economic and financial wellness is an enabler. It's not an endpoint, but it's an enabler to a full life as we define it for ourselves as well. In the context of the gendered lens as well, I think that we'll come to it, I'm sure, that this product design, financial services offering, and economic aspects have meant that that women's fullness of life and aspiration, and also as a result that of men, in some way haven't been realised, generally speaking. And so we're very much looking forward to Grameen playing a role in Australia, building on the strength of Grameen America and elsewhere, but playing our role in both informing ourselves and others about what's possible, but also particularly for the predominantly large number of women all around Australia who want to undertake home-based work and feel connected, and in that is a golden opportunity. So yeah, thanks, Anna.
That idea of setting goals is something I might touch on later, because I think that's really important when thinking about aspirations and where women are feeling they can meet goals or work towards goals, and that capability. And speaking of financial capability, Pushpa, I might hand over to you to tell us a little bit more about what you do and why financial wellness and capability is, so central to the work that you're doing.
Tēnā koutou, katoa, namaste, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever people are from. And my respects to the Indigenous people of Australia, especially. The Finance Centre, as we in short form call it, it was launched in about 11 years ago, and what actually transpired that was the collaboration between private sector and the education institutions. So it was founded by Westpac Bank at that time and Massey University. And the partnership ended last year at the end of 31st of December last year. So this year, Finance Centre is a solely Massey University initiative. It is quite unique in a sense as that it has three very distinct strands within it. So it has research and consultancy strand, which we do national and international consultancy. We do our own in-house research as well as commissioned research. For example, we had a almost 3-year project in Timor-Leste, where we did the needs analysis. We looked at their stakeholder consultation. Then we developed their 12-month campaign for financial building, financial capability. And then we developed their national strategy and a 5-year action plan for them to achieve that national strategy. And then we were out of there because I always work on a philosophy. Whenever you're going into any organization, you must go with exit strategy. And so that's the philosophy we always work on. The second area we get involved in is developing educational resources and online courses, and we have series of those courses. In fact, this year we launched 2 micro-credentials. One is for anti-money laundering, and the second one is for the workforce development. Because one of the things we have noticed is, and that's not only in New Zealand, all around the world, there's quite a lot has been invested in building people's financial capability and providing budgeting advice, providing all services, but not enough has been invested in people who are actually providing these services, building their capability to be able to actually deliver with the changing environment. And COVID was a classic example when you could no longer do a face-to-face budgeting advice. What were the options? Have we equipped people enough to be able to actually change according to that? So that's been that has been our focus for last 2 years, especially in that area. We've developed a competency framework for the workforce that is working in this area, and we've also launched a self-assessment tool, online self-assessment tool. So anybody who's thinking of getting involved in financial capability area can actually go and assess themselves and determine what further training and or professional development they actually need to do. And we developed some resources with individual organizations, and our very proud moment was when we developed a resource that was again the world first for people with learning disabilities. So financial capability program for them. Why women and why I think gendered approach is needed or gendered lens is needed. I think it's important to realize that women have a certain amount of strength which inherently comes with them, and one of them is multitasking. Hence, they end up doing housework as well as managing finances as well as making money. All right, so they end up doing those multitasking. Second thing is, despite the fact that they do multitasking, they are still not paid equitable amount, let alone equal. All right, so I always subscribe to equity rather than equal. Being equal does not necessarily make it equitable. All right. The third thing is, and I'm not going to regurgitate stats, everybody knows where the pay gap is, where the gender gap is. I think the key issue is the women tend to have a tendency of underestimating their own strength and their own knowledge and their own power to achieve things. And especially if the circumstances are not around them, are not in that favor, then they tend to actually go under the radar rather than staying over. And lastly, I always remember Mahatma Gandhi's words. If you teach one man, you teach one person. If you teach one woman, you teach 2 generations. So if one woman is financially capable and understands the concept of financial wellness and has managed to develop tools to achieve that financial wellness, she's going to help 2 generations achieve that.
I love that. I think it's really relevant to some of our discussion today around building wealth. And I'll touch on that a little bit later, but you did mention how women underestimate their own knowledge and their own strength and power to achieve things. And I've got some research from RFI Group that actually sort of reinforces that. So what we see is that less than 1 in 3 women are indicating they have a somewhat high or high level of understanding of banking and finance. And this is a lot lower than men. So over half of men indicate they have a somewhat high or high level of understanding. And of course, there's an element here to perceived level of understanding. So women are potentially underestimating, men might be overestimating. But thinking about that understanding and how that could influence the confidence that women have when making financial decisions or thinking about their ability to build wealth. Pushpa, I might start with you on this. To what extent do you feel that confidence is quite important or that understanding impacts financial wellness?
I think the confidence plays an important role in your behavior. So if you lack confidence in actually dealing with the issues, whether they're financial issues, whether they're social, whether they're whatever it may be. So if you lack confidence, you're not likely to put yourself forward. You're not likely to ask questions. And especially if you come from an environment where the decisions have been made for you or on your behalf, or you have been given the impression that you are actually participating in decision making, but in reality you're not. So if you're coming from that background, and especially some cultures have a tendency to make giving that decision making, I wouldn't say power, but I would say the decision-making expectation to men as opposed to women, then they tend to lack that level of confidence. Plus, if they're not encouraged to ask questions, and if the system, whether their products or their services, are not really conducive to the thinking of women, then it can play an important role. Women do think differently. That's the reality, right? They are more collective and collaborative thinkers than they are individual thinkers. And that's their distinct point of difference, which we still as a society and as a finance sector hasn't quite actually come to grasp with, is to how to capitalize on that and how to actually make that as a strength to their products and services.
And I thinking about that capability and the feeling of confidence. Adam, you mentioned goals before. What do you think with this idea of confidence and that perceived level of understanding? And do you see that when women are thinking of starting businesses, that idea of confidence, can I actually do this? What are my goals for myself and my family?
Absolutely, Anna, and I think I agree completely with Pushpa about the significant strengths of women in working in groups, sharing their plans, and that's what we see at Grameen every day. We see a group of women forming into five people together, and one of the first things that we do at Grameen is we ask, why are you here? What are your dreams and aspirations for the future? Rather than say, okay, how do you want to start an enterprise, but why are you here? And provide that context. And it might be around having a savings buffer. This is a major opportunity, I think, a savings buffer to build resilience and preparedness for unexpected shocks, but also asset building as well. But it might be about savings. It might be about additional income for the whole family to provide fullness of life for that whole family, to take a holiday, to have options. And so I think it's very, very important to say, economic financial inclusion is within a context. What does it enable? It enables hope. It enables a fullness of life. It enables a sense of belonging in an economic sense, but also in a physical place-based sense as well, belonging to a group of people, but also feeling that there is belonging, that my life is worthy as everyone else's. So the very first part of the Grameen model is identifying, first of all, within the group strengths. What are the existing strengths? And all of our groups have, there might be strength in marketing or logistics or a particular type of vocation or cash flow forecasting, business tax and so on. There are a huge range of strengths already existing within the group. So identifying those strengths and then setting a context for to have the group realise that virtually all of what we need as a group to achieve our aims is present within the group. So that's strength spotting, confidence building, enabling, rather than traditional legacy type community programs are looking at what we don't have and how others need to bring it to us. But this is very much about what we do have. We have considerable strengths in our group, and we're going to back ourselves, support ourselves as a group through our individual enterprises to realise that social development agenda. And each group at Grameen uniquely just identifies a statement that is the social development agenda, the common elements of what binds that group together. So each meeting that the group then has starts with, how are we progressing against this? And then there's an agenda-based forum for each meeting. What is our social development agenda? How are we progressing against that? Which of us are ready now to either start our business, take out a small loan, and to develop present a business plan to the group? And I think that it's a really interesting topic, Anna, that you asked, because this is at the heart of the Grameen model. It's about confidence building and recognizing we already have a shared understanding. Unfortunately, due to the legacy issues over the last 200 or 300 years, we see the finance domain is deemed to be, well, it has certainly been influenced by men. Whether it's a societal perspective where men, certainly in Western societies, and I know in sort of Oriental societies as well, that the firstborn male will inherit almost everything for the family, and that power, the power imbalance, and that sort of unconscious bias that creates has an impact, and that we all need to overcome.
Thinking.
And
Exactly.
thinking, absolutely, and thinking, and then therefore, well, if that's part of our societal rules, that person must have more financial capability. And also the fact that over the last 100 years that the banking system, well, last 500 years, from the Medici family in Florence all the way to where we are today, is still dominated by men making predominantly dominated by men making decisions around risk models, potential requirements, returns, how to make returns, and the unconscious assumption that everybody wants to work 5 days a week, 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week, and that doesn't suit our society, for men and women, but especially women. I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I don't think anybody does, but we want to work when it suits us, in the way that it suits us, and we've proven over the last 18 months that this can absolutely be a goal. So I think confidence and understanding are central to all actors in financial inclusion, building that, realizing the strength rather than a deficit model, identifying those strengths and saying, we have what we need. We are the people we've been waiting for. We can realize our own dreams and aspirations, along with actors influencing the system as well. That's a really, really important part.
See, one of the observation and I've made is women are generally, and there are exceptions to every rule, women are generally creative thinkers, right? They are cautious investors, right? They had to, right? Whereas men are more risk takers, not necessarily creative thinkers when it comes to enterprising, right? In general, there are exceptions to that. And that has been perpetuated in our society continually, that the opportunities for enterprises, even within the family, have been given more to men than they have been given to women. And that needs to be looked at. And I think my second observation is our finance sector's focus still has been on shareholders rather than on stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right. So shareholders focus, and as long as we keep shareholder focus, there's a large group of stakeholders, namely women, are missing out on some of those decision making and some of the products and services that could work for them.
And you both have worked in the banking sector. So thinking about that idea of shareholders, something that we're looking at more and more with banks trying to think about customers in a more individual way. What learnings did both of you take from being in the banking sector? And has this influenced the way you're approaching financial wellness in your organizations? Adam, any thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Anna. I think certainly financial institutions around the world, and the financial institution that I work with two. I work with Merrill Lynch in London, US investment bank, now Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and I also work with ANZ in Australia for over a decade. And Pushpa is absolutely right. This shareholder focus that we're seeing, even still, bizarrely, coming out the other side of the pandemic, the desire for short-term returns, driven by large institutional shareholders, often our own pension funds and our own superannuation funds that are having meetings. And I know this because I was on the other side of this probably 15 years ago, saying, we want you, that the institutional investors saying, we want you as a bank to outperform your sectoral peers over the next 6 months in total shareholder return. So capital price appreciation of the shares plus your dividend. And it was astounding for me to see this at close range. And then institutional investors are saying, and here's how we want you to do it. Taking out non-customer facing people, revenue enhancement, actually, and getting on a whiteboard and doing a 2x2 matrix and saying, and this is, I've actually seen this, where an institutional investor said, on one axis, size of revenue opportunity, low, medium, high, and then on the vertical axis, customer degree of consciousness of behaviour. So there were basically, this was 15 years ago, saying there's a sweet spot for customers that are unconscious of their behaviour, maybe at the supermarket checkout, fear of embarrassment of going over. Let's put in a $40 overdrawn account or excess limit fee. And so this really, really that's the nasty sort of sad part of finance. There's some really good stuff happening as well, but so I think that's one aspect. Certainly what we need to promote and what we need to advocate for is very much, particularly when it comes to a gendered lens approach, where many women, from our perspective, want to start an enterprise. It might take 2, 3, 4 years for that enterprise to become highly viable and very successful. And that's what I call a maturity profile mismatch, where you see short-term investor focus of, say, 6-month outperformance that's been put on a pressure on a bank, compared to the 3, 4, 5 years for an enterprise to become very successful and financially sustainable. There needs to be some way of finding an accord. Increasingly, still today, banks are seeking increased share of market, increased share of wallet, so the customer acquisition, share of wallet through, okay, let's cross-sell and engage others, and also to retain the customer. And that often, in the past, that has meant it was a euphemism for entangle the customer, make it very difficult for them to get away and to change their banking relationship. And so this unfortunately has disproportionately disadvantaged women more than men, because it leads to unnecessarily complex arrangements to suit the bank, both from a revenue maximization perspective and what I consider to be a risk elimination perspective as well. In Australia here, the Banking Royal Commission has acknowledged this sales-based culture, rather than creating value for clients, has created significant problems. From my view, banks are an essential service being offered by private owners. And I think there is a role for government absolutely to identify, and I think it's happened already with fee-free transaction accounts, that removing ATM interchange fees and so on. We have seen some progress in this area, but certainly it's led to, unfortunately, an inability to innovate. That the time taken for micro enterprises to mature and consolidate is deemed too long and outside the institutional investor time horizon of 6 months, and it leads to, I think, a significant problem. In terms of things that we need to see banks moving away from the pilot concept testing, customer relations friendly sort of announceable pilot programs to having more entrenched, widely available loans for micro enterprises and so on. You might find it odd for me, Anna, to be advocating that banks enter this sphere. We want to play a key role in showing that it can be done, that there's a way for economic sustainability, and being able to create secure employment where there's control. And I think that's the role of anyone involved in financial inclusion today, is to say, look at what's possible, overcome the barriers, and find friends, and move beyond those customer relations pilot programs to long-term. It actually makes good financial sense from an applied finance perspective. A portfolio approach means that of any investments, you're going to have parts of the portfolio deliver returns over 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, to have 20% of your capital base seeking longer term outperforming returns over the longer term. And I think that's where we're all operating, rather than having 100% trying to achieve that outperformance over the next 6 months. So yeah, that's it. That's from my perspective, I think.
The thing that I really like about the financial wellness sort of sector is that idea that you mentioned around, you're suggesting that the banks could do more to support micro enterprise and women, because it's not in your best interest to try and take all the customers. You're not looking to do that. You're looking to support women. You're looking to support financial wellness and inclusion. And if other banks can be more inclusive, and you mentioned entangling customers, that's it's a really interesting concept when thinking about making it difficult for customers to leave the bank, and especially women. We know their understanding of banking is lower, so do they find it harder to leave a bank? Potentially. And for those of us in this space, we're thinking as long as banking can help customers, they can have the tools to make the decisions and be supported. That's a great outcome for everyone, for Grameen, but also for women and customers. So I really like that point, and there's a lot to unpack there, but really great insights from the banking sector. Pushpa, did you have anything to add on any of that?
Just a correction, fortunately or unfortunately, I haven't worked for bank in my entire life. I have worked with banks, and I think that's why I have a slightly different viewpoint. My observations over the years, both in India and here, and by the way, thanks Adam for taking me back to my teenage years about Grameen Bank, because when I was working in India as a university student for 5 years, I worked in slum area development and rural area development, and Grameen Bank was my very first introduction. The women milk co-op that was started was a classic example worldwide how women collectively can achieve bigger and better things. My observation, we have come a long way, especially in last 10, 15 years. I think the finance sector's thinking is shifting. It gradually has been shifting, not as fast as I would like to see, but then of course I want to see things moving a lot faster in general anyway. They need to still have a focus on impact their work is making rather than how many people they engaged with, right? So they need to shift their focus from engagement and reach to the impact, because still is my observation is the focus is still on the reach. How many people have we actually reached? The second observation is that we need to have more women in decision-making and advisory role in the bank boards. Right? Having a sustainability policy and having half a dozen people and nationwide in your sustainability team is not necessarily going to achieve what you need to achieve. Right? It needs to be a commitment from top to bottom and bottom up as well. So in both directions, the commitment needs to actually go. Women who are there need to be encouraged to challenge the current thinking. They need to be encouraged to challenge the status quo. They need to be encouraged to come up with some weird, wacky ideas, right? They may fail, but they are ideas, because unless we actually encourage them to come up with ideas and value those ideas, they're not going to come forward. If you shot them down once or twice, they're not going to open their mouths next time. Right. As I said, we have come a long way, but we still got a long way to go when it comes to our total finance sector as a whole. Women are very good in operating co-ops. They have a very good track record worldwide in operating co-ops. We need to encourage that a bit more. We need to look at some other models of providing financial support to emerging entrepreneurs, right, other than only banking. And as Adam has already said, we need to give, if I'm a customer, you as a bank need to give me a reason why I should stay with you, right? Not why I should walk out of here. Why? I mean, my recent experience, I sit on two, I manage about, I think, 3 different charities within New Zealand. And I'm really sorry to say that my experience in dealing with 2 different banks on those recently has left a really very sour taste in my mouth. Right? Because there is still the lack of understanding in the frontline staff who they are actually dealing with. And I was left feeling saying, I regard myself educated. I regard myself intelligent enough person. I regard myself knowing enough about money and how it works. If I was left with that taste in my mouth, imagine the vulnerable customers who are coming through the doors? Right? Are we actually making it any easier for vulnerable customers to see bank or any finance organization as a means to achieve their goal? Because that's what, to me, they should be, right? As a customer, they should be there to help me as a means to achieve my goals, not only making profit for their shareholders. Right? Because without me as a stakeholder, without me as a customer, shareholder is not going to have any profit. Right? It's my, whatever meager amount of money it is, that's what is enabling the shareholders to actually have the profit. So here's a challenge for all the shareholders from me today. If they can decide that from 2020 onwards, their total profit margin, whatever it comes, 20% of that, they are going to donate and or invest in women enterprises around the world, and then come back and take stock in 10 years' time to see what that has achieved.
A great challenge. It's a big one as well, but it's important. And we did mention,
see, 20% less of profit is not going to put them in the street, right? It might reduce, their comfort level in retirement, but it's not going to make them go hungry. Whereas 20% and somebody who's struggling to set up a business to feed the family, it will mean a lot. Right? And that's where the difference is. That's where the thinking needs to shift. Can I sacrifice a little bit of my comfort to actually enable somebody else to put the food on their table? That's the thinking we need to actually keep thinking continually.
Absolutely. And then it sort of takes it back to that customer-centric approach where you're thinking about how can we support customers rather than how can we make profits for shareholders.
I'm not against profit. I mean, for God's sake, that's why people invest money, is to earn from it, right? It's not that. But when it actually goes beyond the expectations and when it starts to disregard what is actually happening within our society around us, that's where I start to feel slightly jittery. I would find it very hard to sleep on a comfortable bed if I know somebody downstairs is actually sleeping roughly on the footpath, not even having a sheet over their. To me, that's the kind of thinking. So bringing that level of consciousness within your thinking, within your business approach, within your profit sharing, that will really help. Just bringing a little bit of that consciousness within that will be really very helpful.
Do you think thinking about some of the barriers that do exist for women and building wealth, do you think that there's more that needs to be done from a legislation perspective, a government perspective, financial institution? Is it a little bit of everything sort of needs to have a more targeted approach, more collaboration in the industry? Or do either of you see there is a specific, player in the market that could really be doing a lot more? Adam, did you have any thoughts on that one?
I think, and can I just quickly say to Pushpa, I love your idea about the 20%. I would suggest to be 20% of revenue, even bolder, 20% of revenue rather than profit.
I'll support you on that one.
I think that way that for the investment from the very beginning will, rather than be paid out of profit, that's conditioned. You must make a profit before we do this, but you must start with this in mind. That's my only suggestion. But Anna, to the barriers you mentioned and suggestions, I think there are three types of barriers. One societal, one what I call structural financial exclusion, and then another which is economic. In the societal barriers, we've talked about a little bit, but about the conscious and unconscious bias of expectations of women and men, and this antiquated notion of the firstborn male inheriting. Even in Australia here, we have the Australia Club. Can you believe it? In this day and age, 2021, 62% of members in the Australia Club, this elite business leaders, political and economic actors, 62% of members voted to continue to exclude women. It is absolutely abhorrent and offensive. And I think anyone who's a member of that club, it's like these people are making a mockery of themselves. They're like Groucho Marx saying, I would never join a club that would have somebody like me as a member. So this is the sort of thing that the Australia Club needs to start asking itself. That there's a societal aspect as well about these people are the major directors, board owners, people like David Gonski. There's a whole Malcolm Turnbull. There's a range of others who have come out in favour and said, look, we're Australia Cup members, but we want to see women being admitted as members. So they're on the right side of it. 62% are on the wrong side of it. Structural financial inclusion, again, we come back to the short-termism really what we need to do. One of the suggestions that I'd like to make, it is quite confronting and I think revelatory, but this short-termism of banks and financial institutions and other organisations as well, mining companies, it's all enabled by no one, I suppose, society not knowing who the true beneficial owners are of those corporations. We need transparency. And in this day where we've got technology and there's a privacy argument and then there's a societal argument to this, that the privacy argument is, I want to invest through a blind trust or so that I can dissociate myself from the behaviour of the corporation that I'm investing in. And that happens very significantly. You look at there are some significant examples of the way that's done. But through nominee companies and through pension funds and so on, we as pension fund and superannuation account owners, we deserve the right to know in which corporations on a daily basis, we have the technology, where is my shareholder, where is my investment actually being made from a pension, from a superannuation fund, from other investments. That's really important. I think that if we have that transparency of where are my investments right now on any given minute, we can, when somebody does the wrong thing, we can put pressure on through shareholder activism, put pressure on those organisations to do the right thing. I think that's a high level aim. It's a challenge, but also there's also from an economic viewpoint, looking at insecure employment, that there's an economic and psychological aspect that comes from people. So you're having secure, being responsible employers, committing to people beyond the next week in terms of employment, and moving away from this anachronistic view of work that all work must be full-time, city or office or place-based with no flexibility. But I agree with Pushpa, I'm an optimist. We're starting to see some significant recognition there. The recognition of the value of parents, parenting, caring, and other key roles. That multitasking, Pushpa, that you talked about early, is very, very important. So I think the areas of innovation that we need to see, Anna, that will disproportionately or accelerate both women and men at the same time is innovation around home ownership models. Again, a very risk averse, and it's often with good intentions, but prudential top-down approaches around managing and being a responsible lender quite often diminishes innovation. That there are many innovative home ownership models in other parts of the world where somebody's responsibly paying rent for a year or two and then retrospectively deeming those rental payments as interest and principal against a mortgage loan that was struck 2 years prior. And you already have equity in the property, and you can use that equity in the asset in lieu of the upfront deposit, which is the biggest single barrier, especially with skyrocketing real estate prices around the world right now. But micro enterprise development, moving beyond the pilot cottage industry, community relations type thing, to making it, to seeing it as a highly attractive, viable sector, but pushing out the time horizon to 12 24, 36 months rather than 6 months. And I think there are a few suggestions that I'd make around how financial institutions could improve or make a stronger contribution to financial inclusion.
And I think as a society, I mean, Adam has outlined what financial institutions can do. And I think as a society and as government, we need to continue on the path of where we keep closing the gender pay gap. I mean, in New Zealand in 20 years, we've moved from 16.7%, for example, 20 years ago, our gender pay gap was that. Now it is 9.5%. It's a good move. We can move slightly faster. I think second thing is we need to promote and be transparent about the contribution, unpaid contribution women are making to the society in general, whether it is child rearing, whether it is caring, whether it's nurturing, whether it is looking after elderly parents, whatever. Putting value to that work is actually still not as common as it needs to be. So it sounds very small, but it puts women, boost their confidence level that how much they are actually financially contributing to the society and to the economy as a whole. Housing has been a big issue in New Zealand. There are some fantastic models outside which we should be looking at, and we should be encouraging that. Not everybody wants to own a home, right? But home ownership is seen as the best possible option at the moment as investment. What other products and services can we provide, and especially to women, which can actually encourage them to move towards? I would, at my age now, I would love to actually not own a house, provided there is a accessible, high quality, long-term rental available till my last day. I would sell my property to somebody who would do that. But there is nothing, not very many options are available like that. There is a lot of thinking going on at the moment in New Zealand, and I think we are getting there. But we also need to be looking at where women are good at when it's managing money. My observation is they are excellent in budgeting and in day-to-day life. You cannot beat them. But where they are still lacking is long-term planning for their future, because they have been socially and culturally conditioned to actually focus on family and children. And that's what they've been doing. By the time it comes their turn, when the children have got higher education, husband is set and wherever, whatever they wanted to achieve, by the time their turn comes, they don't have very much time span left to accumulate wealth that they need to accumulate for retirement, right? So we need to be looking at, while she is investing right from the day one in children and family, that there should be a certain proportion of whether it is husband's funding or whether it's government provides it, whatever it is, certain proportion goes in her retirement fund in exchange for the free service that she's providing. That would be really quite good way for a woman to accumulate funds for their retirement. Apart from, and the last thing is, at the moment, the programs that I see them, they're focusing on saving and investing for women. Fantastic. They are very good for middle class women who are earning enough to be able to save and who are earning enough to be able to invest. What about a big proportion who are struggling to make ends meet? What are we actually doing for that group of women to create opportunities for them to accumulate wealth for their future? That thinking still needs to happen, but more than what it is happening at the moment, in my view.
That point about the unpaid contribution, I feel that women, we know they're underestimating their understanding, but I think you made a good point where they're actually good at managing money. They're managing households, they're managing, different appointments, they're managing so many. It's that mental burden that they're constantly juggling, but it's little recognition about the toll that takes and the fact that that's also a role. And I love that point about if you could actually add a value to that, make people realize that this is the contribution that's happening that is, limiting that ability to build wealth, or, it's quite difficult to be having even the capacity to be thinking about long-term planning because you've got everything happening tomorrow and yesterday, and it's really, really full on. And I think that's a really great point, and something that's, really worth noting for a longer term change in society that could make a really big difference.
My dream is, Anna, that before I die, the term that I hear quite often from women, "Oh, I'm just a housewife," disappears from their vocabulary. That's my ultimate dream, when women stop saying, "I'm just a housewife." And that mentality, we need to take it out of their mind. And that mentality, we also need to take it out of our society in general, their mind. To me, being a housewife is the most challenging job you will ever find.
I would agree with you, Pushpa, and I would say to suggest remove that statement to say I am an enabler of a cohesive, well-functioning family who could make a great. They are in realize the world around them. They're resilient around with the world around them, and relate well with all human beings. And I think that's what the common term of housewife enables all of that, which is you cannot say that something is more valuable in society than that outcome.
My father used to describe my mother as the Minister of Home Affairs and Financial Controller. And yet she never ever put out to earn one single penny in her life, but she controlled. She still does. Now it is son's money rather than my father's money. But that's how my father used to describe my mother. He would not dare to spend any money without consulting with her, because she was the one who was managing the household fund. So there are examples, we've just forgotten them.
I love that idea of an enabler of a well-functioning family. It's just such a housewife. We undermine exactly what that even means. What that duty entails. It's not relaxing reading books. It's a whole job in itself. And we do have a question that's come in from the audience, which is, how can school or college provide or support women with financial literacy? Pushpa, you're working in this space. Do you have an answer for this question?
I think that, to me, what needs to happen is that women, and whether it's men or women, and the school as the children, they need to understand, and we need to provide them opportunity to understand their role within the house and within the society, and what are their dreams and how are they actually going to achieve those dreams. So teaching them goal setting, and teaching them then placing value to each of those goals. I usually do a dream board for when I work with young people and say, okay, create your dream board. Now tell me which part of your dream will require funds and which part will not require funds. And the parts that will require funds, where are you going to get it from? Right? So the conversation needs to start with them, what they want to achieve, how they want to achieve, rather than we just regurgitating the set syllabus for them. So taking them from the point they are and then moving them, giving them tools to actually keep moving forward. But schools have to have a kind of a syllabus, they kind of have all sorts of things. But to me, you can still have that and have creative ways of actually delivering the content, right? So the investment needs to go in the people who are delivering the content, so they can contextualize whatever content is there in front of them. So it's not the content. We've invested a lot into content, into programs, into courses. We need to invest sufficient amount in people who can pick up the content and then deliver it in the context what is needed.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Pushpa, and I think that there is great content out there. And I think the mode of delivery, there's great content, but the mode of delivery sometimes, first of all, there's getting shelf space within a classroom or an experience-based environment. I think when it comes to financial wellbeing, capability building, my view, and I've seen evidence that demonstrates this considerable, is that the best outcomes around capability building come from experience-based, just-in-time information rather than just-in-case information. So this abstract, if you're in this situation, what would you do? I think what works for me personally, and I know many other people, our financial capability has been built while we've been applying for our first loan, while we've been opening our first bank account, while we've been applying for a mortgage loan and a home loan and so on. So I'd say I think my recommendation would be for 20% of the content delivery around financial capability be abstract, just in case. Whereas, but actually also 80% being around education, simulating real world situation, role play. You're a couple, you're about to apply for a mortgage, you're a young entrepreneur about to start a business. What do you need to do? How do you, and simulate that within an action-based classroom environment or a supported environment would be my response. Building on, and I agree, Pushpa, there's great content available. It's just the mode of delivery and the learning outcomes really need to be more experience-based. You simulate the real world or experience the real world, go and do it. As a cooperative in university in particular, it's a great place, or a TAFE college, to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of innovative ways of building financial capability is going on in schools in that. I think one of the things the research shows is that you need to experience in order to change your behavior. Right. So experience is the one that changes your behavior. So for young people, I usually say to teachers, the ones I work with, I said, forget about teaching them about money at the young age. Teach them the concept, the notion of delayed gratification. If you can teach them the notion of delayed gratification, translating that notion into money is piece of cake. It's just saying you cannot have everything when you want it now. That's what is needed. That needs to be taught at home. It needs to be reconfirmed and reassured in school. And then, and the last thing is financial well-being is a journey. All right, it's not a destination, and it changes your whole financial well-being changes at what stage of life you are. What does financial well-being look like for a 10-year-old as opposed to 20-year-old, as opposed to a 50-year-old, are very different. Therefore, you need to learn and actually access the tools is going to continually keep changing. And the more you experience it, the more you're going to be comfortable with it.
I think that's a great point to end on. Financial well-being is a journey, not a destination. So I think I feel like if we wrap up there with, we've discussed some really great topics here. You've provided action points for the banks. We've got education ideas for what parents can be doing even when they're teaching kids at home about delayed gratification. There's so many action points there that I know I'm going to be thinking about in the back of my mind throughout today. But thank you both for your perspective and your answers today. This has been a really great discussion.
Thanks, Anna, for your great facilitation and stimulating this really good conversation. For Pushpa, your wisdom and energy is infectious. I really appreciate sharing an opportunity to be with you today, and also to Mariko and to Vinita. Thank you so much for the opportunity through the APAC Financial Wellness Initiative, and it's been a fabulous time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much.
All of you. Thank you, Pushpa. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Anna. You've just been fantastic. And, it's my job to come up with the top 3 learnings for myself. And I've really, decided to summarize them very succinctly using Pushpa's language. Teach one woman and you change 2 generations. I really love that. So, one of the main reasons for us to take the whole concept of gender lens to financial inclusion is to ensure equity. So I really love that, not just equality, equity. The second big thing that I've heard from all of you is that every part of the ecosystem that supports women needs to have a role to play, whether it's the school, whether it's the bank, whether it's the home, whether it's the government, everyone has a role to play. And unless they all play that role, it will be difficult to shift the dial. If we consider gender pay has moved, from 17% to 9% in New Zealand, and it's taken how many years? So it's going to be that long-term journey that we take in order to shift this. That the community sector, I really love that, Adam, what you're saying is that the community sector has taken the initiative to come up with innovations and pilot them and try them. But really now we're looking to all of the sectors to be able to scale these up so that they become embedded into practice as usual. And what the NGOs are showing is that it can be done sustainably. So, that is one of the challenges that the sector has taken on board. And I really wish the entire sector well to make that certainty. And the last thing I really loved, Pushpa, what you said was give it a go. If you want anyone to build a confidence, the best way to do that is to allow them to make a mistake. And unless you give people the confidence that they have to try, test, and then learn from what works, but equally from what doesn't work, we'll never really move the tile in innovation. So to me, those are the top 3 learnings. I've really enjoyed that. And I'll hand over to Mariko for the final word.
Oh, thank you so much, Vinita. And thank you to Adam, Pushpa, and Anna and all of our attendees for another fantastic discussion today. Just wanted to say that if you're interested in learning more about the APAC Financial Wellness Initiative, you can reach out to us on our LinkedIn page, and you can see if you want to get involved, reach out to us there as well. And we thank you so much, and have a great Financial Inclusion Week, everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Lovely to see you all.
Bye-bye.